You. Okay, it is the latter half of October, and typically we'd be hopefully trying to bring in some storms here in Northern California and the Bay Area, but that is not the case. Joining me is Brian Garcia, the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service. And Brian, it looks like fire season continues, and this will be possibly a busy week, right?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Fire season is continuing in California for sure, with the rain continuing to shift north of us and impacting more of the Pacific Northwest than us. It's kind of typical in the La Nina years as we go into that. Storm tracks favor the north, so that leaves us high and dry. And with a dry winter last year, all the fuels drying out significantly over the summer and the heat of the summer. Now we're super dry fuels, getting those offshore winds, those Diablo winds, and very dry conditions. It is prime season for fires to have explosive growth.
And in general, can you kind of describe this week? It is just like fire danger all week long and kind of in different magnitudes, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we have essentially a myriad of red flag warnings or fire weather watches in place or going into place. So right now we're looking at North Bay. That's what we've been looking at the last couple days. So this morning, yesterday morning, we're really looking at that area. And then tomorrow, as we get into Wednesday night and especially early Thursday morning, we're looking at a red flag warning going into effect for that time frame. So right now, even outside of this graphic right here, we have just issued a red flag warning for the North Bay Mountains, as well as the East Bay Mountains and East Bay interior valleys, as well as the Santa Cruz Mountains and down to the coast in San Mateo for Wednesday at 10 p.m. through Friday at 8 a.m. So we're looking at red flag type conditions developing Wednesday night into the early hours of Thursday morning, a bit of a lull through Thursday, and then again developing overnight Thursday into the early hours of Friday morning. So that's gusty conditions and very dry humidities.
So just to break it down, there's so many warnings out. So the one we're looking at right now, this is just for the North Bay, right? And this is until Wednesday morning. For the North Bay Hills, we should stress, right?
Correct. Yeah, this one is just for the North Bay Hills. And like you said, it goes through Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. The peak time frame we're really looking at are kind of those pre-dawn hours right on through sunrise. That's kind of that core favored window of the strong winds going through that area.
Okay, and then I'm going to bring up another graphic here. Do you see this? This is the red flag warning you were talking about. This is more widespread, and this begins Wednesday evening for portions of the Bay Area.
Correct. Yeah. So Wednesday evening, 10 p.m. through Friday morning, 8 a.m. And again, it covers a lot of the Bay Area and especially those East Bay interior valleys. We could see some gusts down in those areas reaching as high as 30, 40 miles per hour. You get up into the peaks like Diablo and those areas, we're looking more of 50 mile per hour type gusts. And again, relative humidities in the teens. So think 15% relative humidity. In the sunrise type hours, it's very dry at a time of day that we're normally very moist.
And what's interesting here is it looks like you've kind of included portions of the coast here, right? I'm kind of pointing that out right here, closer to San Mateo County for the coastline. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So with the winds, the way that they're oriented, coming from east going to the west, so blowing offshore, they go up over the mountains, then the winds sink down towards the coast. So you can get a bit of an acceleration of the winds right down at the coast, as well as warming and drying, even beyond what atmospheric models would show. It's just these atmospheric dynamics that go into play at these types of time frames when we get those wind orientations in the right direction that precipitate the need to have a red flag warning go to the coast.
Okay, and I also want to talk about, so we've talked about this week in the short term, but possibly the biggest event that moves in early next week, early Monday morning. It's still a few days out, right? So trying to forecast detail, it's still really fuzzy, but potentially, is that something you're really concerned with?
Yeah, so we have some favorite atmospheric models that we look at, and they're a bit incongruent right now in terms of the time frame. So we could be looking at early Saturday morning, early Sunday morning, early Monday morning, depending upon what model you look at. But it looks like it's going to be a 2-day stretch. So it's going to probably go Sunday morning, maybe the strongest. Then it looks like it may go into Monday morning. So things keep getting pushed back in time. But that event could be the strongest one that we've seen yet this year. And if that pans out, it'll most likely affect all of North Bay again, as well as East Bay and the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah, I just kind of want to go into like the meteorology here and take a look at some. I know there's a lot of different forecast models and graphics we can look at. I just want to talk about what's going on here. And if I were to go back, give me a second.
Yeah.
But to talk about Jandal's weather sites, all the great links here. But if we were to look at this forecast model right now, this is just one of many we can look at, and just for reference for the viewers here. So this is starting out Tuesday morning in Zulu time, so Tuesday 12 a.m. and then we're kind of going through time here. We're showing you a bunch of numbers that are really confusing, right? But as we take this, let's see, as we take this into Sunday and then into Monday morning. So we are seeing, this is for Oakland, for the airport, but this Monday morning, 4 a.m., 25 gusting to 34. If I were to bring that up, is that the pattern you're concerned with those winds that the model's kind of showing accelerating values?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. When we see those types of values showing up at someplace like Oakland International Airport at sea level, what's happening up above the surface is even more. So that's the reason we're looking up in the hills at that point for very, very strong windy conditions to exist, very gusty. And that time frame, depending upon how the models actually play out and what it kind of looks like as we get into the higher resolution model. So essentially looking at this model here, we're looking at like 720p, and when we get into a closer time frame where we get those higher resolution models, we actually are looking more like at 4K type def. So as we get to those, we'll probably see a little bit more granularity and a little bit more detail in terms of the wind gusts that we could project. But just looking at this type of pattern, this type of setup, these are the types of events that we could potentially see in different parts of the Bay Area, gusts in the hills upwards of 70, 80 miles per hour, as opposed to like the next couple days where we're looking at 40, 50 miles per hour gusts, which is still a lot, but we could really ratchet it up that next notch.
Yeah, and I know we're still a few days away, but it does seem like potentially, is it safe to say maybe at this early stage, this could be the strongest offshore wind event of the season, if everything lines up?
Yeah, if everything lines up, that's absolutely right. This could end up being the strongest offshore wind event of the season.
And of course that coincides with the horrible element of the fuels. They are historically dry, right?
Right, yeah. So we've gone through a very hot summer. We've had several heat waves, especially that one in August where we had 5 days that culminated at the end with that big lightning outbreak. But we have dried out the fuel significantly, simply due from all the heat and a very dry winter last winter. So we are primed. Right now in the Diablo Range in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we are actually at record dryness for those areas. We haven't quite reached record for the Bay Marine Zone or North Bay specific, but very close to record in those areas too. But when we're breaking records in terms of dryness, it's very scary for this time of year because we know we're going to get the dry offshore winds this time of the year.
And just based on like what people are seeing, I know you have forecasters that go out to the fire zones that have already happened. Are they kind of seeing fire behavior, kind of linked with that historically dry pattern set that has been developing?
Yeah, our meteorologists that go out on the fires, they're definitely seeing the dry fuels play a large role in terms of the longevity of these fires being around. So if the fuels are a little bit more moist, then it's a lot easier to put the fires out for the firefighters. But with such dry conditions out there, any sort of wind, I mean, we're even talking like 5 to 15 mile per hour winds, they can really drive through the grasses very fast and very easily.
Yeah, and that's a key point too, because we'll say winds 20, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And I was talking to a firefighter buddy the other day, and he was just saying, you just think about when you a breath of when you're blowing on something, what is that, 1, 2, 3 miles an hour, that could even have somewhat of an impact. So it does it is quite concerning when everything is so incredibly dry this time of year. So there will likely be a red flag warning kick in. You'll be prepping that over the next few days, I guess, for the weekend.
Yeah, Yeah, that's right,
In
Mark. So as we start to get through this event that we're currently in, and start to get into the throes of the next event, so that Thursday morning and Friday morning, that's when we'll probably start to talk about issuing a fire weather watch for the weekend event, whether it be Saturday, Sunday, and or Monday, and potentially even into Tuesday, depending upon what models you believe. So we'll see how that all plays out, but you'll start to see that messaging start to come out from our office probably. Maybe even tomorrow or Thursday at the latest that we'll start talking about it.
And I think of weather in a weird way sometimes, but let me know if this is just totally off base. But when I think of these offshore winds, I just kind of think of it like as a gigantic hair dryer in the sky that's just kind of constantly blowing dry, warm air. And is that kind of in what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, in a very simplistic way, yeah, absolutely. It's the hair dryer event. It's taking all of that dry air from across the continent and blowing it out off the coast. So, and then if we get a ridge of high pressure set up over us and we get warm, then we'll get that warm hair dryer set up. But the interesting thing about fire weather warnings, red flag warnings, or even fire weather watches, when we're talking about this sort of stuff, we look at three things very simply. We look at wind speed, we look at the relative humidity, and we look at the fuel moisture. So when all those things are at critical levels, that's what we look for issuance of a fire weather watch or even upgrading it to red flag warning. It has nothing to do with temperature. And so it's actually really interesting. A lot of these events will be warm leading up to it.
Yeah.
And then this event will come through, we'll get the winds blow through, we'll have fires start, and the temperatures will actually be in the 50s as opposed to in the 80s or 90s. So hot temperatures don't equal fire danger, but what they do is that those hot temperatures continue to dry the fuels even more. So now if you have hot temperatures and fire together, you can dry the fuels even more rapidly. But right now, this time of season, we're so dry as it is, we don't need any more drying.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because just historically, when I remember the past events, a lot of these devastating events have kind of been with a cooler setup, that kind of even some a system that produced rain, not here in the Bay Area, but that cold air historically seems to have been linked to these stronger wind events.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in 2017 with the North Bay fires, the temperatures with that, they weren't extremely hot, but what made it warm was, to get nerdy again in terms of meteorology, because the mountains, the wind blowing across the mountains, and the wind came down the mountains towards the Santa Rosa Valley, that air up top, because it's under lower pressure, is a little bit bigger. And as it went down the slope, it gets under higher pressure because now there's more atmosphere pushing down on it, so it condenses. It's what we call adiabatic compression. And when that happens, the air actually gets warmer. So we actually saw temperatures that night as the winds got strong at the Santa Rosa Airport in the 80s, but that was because of the wind speed, bringing that wind down the slope very fast, compressing a lot of air very quickly. But the actual ambient air around the region without the wind was more in the 50s and 60s.
Okay. Well, Brian, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. And I hope someday we could be talking about the first storm approaching the Bay Area.
Yeah, I hope so too, Mark, but I have a feeling that's not going to be for a while.
Yeah, it's not showing up in the maps. Thank you again,
Yeah,
Brian.
no problem, anytime.